Hey Army, this is Taehyung. Before we start, tell me where you're listening from. I want to know how far this voice travels tonight. If you're lying in bed, close your eyes. Let me be the voice that keeps you company for a while. I never thought I'd talk about this publicly. There are things you carry in your heart for years, not because you want to hide them, but because you don't know how to say them without breaking down. For me, it's about my mom, the woman who raised me, who gave me everything, yet also left me with words that I couldn't forget, no matter how hard I tried. Growing up, I always felt like my mom could see through me. She'd look at me with this mix of pride and worry, like she already knew the kind of life I was walking into. Even before I became Taehyung of BTS, she warned me about fame. She told me, "You'll shine in front of everyone, but you'll cry where no one can see." Back then, I laughed. I thought she was being dramatic. But now I understand every single word of it. When I first moved to Seoul, my mom would call me almost every night, sometimes just to ask if I'd eaten, sometimes to remind me to pray, but other times she'd go quiet. I could hear her breathing on the other side of the phone, like she wanted to say something but didn't know how. Then one night, after a long silence, she said something that's been echoing in my mind ever since. Don't lose yourself trying to make everyone love you. At that time, I didn't get it. I thought love was the goal. I thought if I worked hard enough, sang beautifully enough, smiled brightly enough, everyone would love me. But when millions of people know your name, they also start believing they know your heart, and that's where the pain begins. As the group got bigger, my phone buzzed constantly. Messages, mentions, fan posts, comments, some full of love, some full of judgment. And I tried to respond to all of it, even in silence, even in the way I smiled through exhaustion. I thought that was my job. I thought being strong meant never letting anyone see me tired. But then there was this one night we just finished a show overseas. I came back to the hotel and sat on the edge of my bed, scrolling through comments one after another. Some of them were kind, but a few cut deep. I don't even remember the exact words anymore. What I do remember is how empty I felt afterward. I called my mom. It was past midnight in Korea. She answered immediately, like she'd been waiting. I didn't say much, just, "Mom, I'm tired." She didn't ask from what. She just said, "I know." Then she said something that changed everything for me. She said, "If you ever start forgetting who you are, come home, not as Taehyung, just as my son." I couldn't hold it in. I cried that night, the kind of cry that leaves you shaking. Because I realized how far I drifted from that boy she raised, the one who used to sit in the back of her truck singing to the sound of the wind. I missed that simplicity, that peace. But the truth is, fame doesn't let you go back easily. You can visit, but you can't stay. I've had to learn how to carry both worlds, the one everyone sees and the one that belongs only to me and my mom. I think every time she sees me smile on screen, she remembers the times I didn't, and maybe that's why her words still sting, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. When I finally opened up about this to the members, they just listened. Jungkook was quiet. Namjoon nodded, like he'd heard something similar from his own mom. And Yoongi said something that stuck with me. "The world sees us, but Our moms see through us. That's the truth. Moms don't just raise you, they carry your pain even when you don't tell them. And sometimes they say painful things not to hurt you, but to protect the part of you that fame can't reach. Even now, whenever I'm on stage and the lights go down, I hear her voice in the back of my mind. Don't lose yourself. And that's when I remind myself why I started this in the first place. Not to be loved by everyone, but to love what I do without losing who I am. Sometimes healing isn't about forgetting the painful words, it's about learning why they were said. There's something strange about memories, they never fade completely. They just sit quietly in the corner of your heart, waiting for a certain song, a certain smell, or even a random message to wake them up again. That's what happened to me last winter. I had just returned to Korea after a long overseas schedule, the kind of trip where the flights blur together and your body doesn't even know what time it is anymore. I remember stepping into my apartment, everything was silent, dark, and almost too clean. I dropped my bags, sat on the couch, and realized how empty everything felt. That's when I saw a small envelope on the table. My manager said my mom had dropped it off a few days earlier. Inside was a short letter written in her handwriting, the same handwriting that used to appear on my lunch boxes when I was in school. It said, "You look tired, my son. Remember to breathe. The world can wait for a minute if you need to rest." I must have read that line 20 times. It was such a simple thing, but it hit me harder than anything else that week. Because deep down, I'd been moving so fast that I forgot what it meant to just stop. I'd forgotten that I was human first and an artist second. That night, I turned off my phone. No notifications, no rehearsals, just silence. I opened the window and let the cold soul air hit my face. It was the first time in a long time that I felt something real. Not a camera flash, not the echo of an audience, just the sound of the wind. I thought about my mom a lot that night. How she used to work multiple jobs just to support me. How she'd come home late, her hands rough from cleaning, but still smile like everything was okay. I never realized how much she gave up for me, how much she hid behind that smile. When I was younger, I didn't understand why she was so strict about humility and kindness. She used to say, "The higher you go, the softer your heart should be." Back then, I just nodded. Now I know she was preparing me for the loneliness that comes with success. Because when you reach the top, you start losing pieces of yourself you didn't even know were missing. A few weeks later, I visited her. I didn't tell anyone. I just took a train to Daegu early in the morning, wearing a mask and cap. She was outside, watering her plants. The moment she saw me, her face lit up that same smile I'd seen since childhood. She didn't say anything dramatic. She just said, "You finally came home." Inside, she made my favorite soup, the one she always cooked when I was sick. We sat together, eating quietly. It felt like time slowed down, like I was a kid again. But I could see it in her eyes, that mix of pride and worry still there. She asked softly, "Are you okay?" I hesitated. I wanted to say yes to make her feel at ease. But for the first time in years, I decided to be honest. "Not really," I said. "Sometimes I feel like I'm disappearing." She looked at me for a long moment, then smiled gently. "You can't disappear if you know where home is." That sentence stayed in my mind for days. I realized what she meant, that no matter how far I go, no matter how much the world changes around me, as long as I keep that part of myself that she raised, that sincerity, that warmth, I'll never truly be lost. Before I left, she gave me a small box. Inside was an old photo of me as a kid, sitting on her lap, holding a toy microphone. She said, "This is when you first said you wanted to sing." Looking at that picture, I remembered that boy, the one who sang just because it made him happy, not because it had to be perfect. Somewhere along the way, I'd buried that joy under pressure, expectations, and noise. But my mom's words, her painful, honest, beautiful words, helped me dig it back out. Now, whenever I'm in the studio, I keep that photo beside me. It reminds me that no matter how many songs I write, the truest lyrics will always come from that kid's heart. The one my mom believed in before anyone else did. Sometimes I wonder how she does it, how she stays so calm knowing her son lives under the spotlight every day. Maybe mothers just learn to love through distance. Maybe their silence is their way of protecting you. When I asked her once if she ever worries about me, she said, "Every day, but I trust you more than my fear." And that broke me in the best way because I realized that my mom's love isn't something that needs to be spoken loudly. It's in her quiet prayers, in her old letters, in her simple messages that remind me to eat. It's in every word she ever said, even the painful ones. Fame teaches you how to perform, but mothers, they teach you how to feel. After that visit to Daegu, something inside me shifted. I came back to Seoul feeling lighter, but also more aware of how fragile everything around me was. The schedules, the rehearsals, the interviews, they all kept moving like an endless carousel that never stops. And in that rush, I started noticing how easy it is to lose the small, meaningful moments that remind you why you started in the first place. The day after I returned, I went straight to the studio. It was late at night, the kind of hour when the city outside feels half asleep and the air inside smells like coffee and cables. I sat in front of the microphone, the lights dimmed, and I just started talking. Not singing, just talking about everything I'd been carrying, the exhaustion, the confusion, the loneliness that hides behind applause. And most of all, my mom's words. Don't lose yourself trying to make everyone love you. Those words echoed louder in that room than any lyric I'd ever written. I pressed record, closed my eyes, and began humming. A melody came out soft, almost trembling, and I started to shape it into something real. It wasn't meant to be a song for release. It was just me trying to breathe, but as I sang, the memories of my mom's voice, her laughter, her tears began blending into every note. At some point, Jungkook walked in. He didn't say anything at first. He just sat down quietly and listened. When I finished, he said, "Hyung, that didn't sound like a song. It sounded like a confession." I laughed, but he was right. It was a confession, not to the fans, not to the world, but to myself. Later that week, we had a rare day off. I decided to visit the Han River alone. It was cold, the kind of cold that stings your hands even through gloves. I sat on one of the benches, hoodie up, sunglasses on, just watching the water move. There's something healing about rivers. They remind you that life keeps flowing no matter what happens. While I sat there, I remembered something my mom told me years ago, right before I left for Seoul to become a trainee. She held my hands and said, "If one day you feel like the world's too heavy, look for something that keeps moving. The wind, the water, the clouds, let them remind you to keep going." It felt like she was right there with me that day. I could almost hear her voice in the wind. That night, I wrote her a message. Not a long one, just a few words. "Mom, I'm still here. I'm still trying to be your son." She replied a few hours later. "That's all I ever wanted." Those words, they broke me again. Because they were so simple, yet so full of meaning. I realized I'd spent years chasing perfection when all she ever wanted was for me to be genuine, to stay human. A few days later, I told Namjoon about the letter. He smiled and said, "Mothers don't need big words to say they love us. They just need to know we're listening." That stuck with me. Because for the longest time, I thought love needed to be grand, poetic, public, but real love, the kind that lasts, is quiet, it's patient, it doesn't demand attention. During our next rehearsal, I started noticing things I hadn't before, the way Jungkook would always stay a little longer after everyone left, the way Jimin would quietly check on each of us, the way Yoongi never said much but always made sure we were okay. I realized that in their own way, they were all carrying their own versions of their mother's words. Different voices, same love. We're all just trying to live up to the hopes of the people who raised us even when we don't realize it. One evening after rehearsal, I video called my mom. She looked tired but happy. I told her about the new song I'd been working on, the one inspired by her. She smiled and said, "Don't make it sad, make it honest." That was such a mom thing to say. She didn't want a song that made people cry. She wanted one that made them feel seen. So I rewrote it. I changed the lyrics. I made it about the strength it takes to love someone enough to let them go chase their dreams even when it hurts. When I played it for the group, the room went quiet. Hoseok said it reminded him of his mother too, and suddenly it wasn't just my story, it was all of ours. Every son, every daughter who's ever carried both pride and guilt for leaving home in pursuit of something bigger. After that, I knew I had to share it someday, not for fame, not for views, but because maybe someone out there needs to hear what my mom told me. Maybe someone out there is trying so hard to be perfect that they've forgotten to just be themselves. That night, before sleeping, I listened to the demo again. There was this one line that kept repeating in my head. "You taught me to love myself before the world ever knew my name." I smiled because it was true. My mom was the first person who saw me, not the idol, not the performer, but just Taehyung. And even when her words hurt, I know now that they came from love. Painful words can still be loving words. They just take time to understand. And now, every time I hear her voice, I don't hear pain anymore. I hear protection. I hear truth. I hear love that never asks for anything in return. There's a kind of peace that comes when you finally stop running from your pain. For years, I tried to silence my mom's words, the ones that made me question myself, that forced me to look at who I'd become. But now, instead of avoiding them, I let them sit beside me. I listen to them the way you listen to an old song, sometimes painful, sometimes comforting, always familiar. After finishing the song inspired by her, I couldn't stop thinking about how much she shaped the man I've become. Her presence was never loud. She didn't push, she didn't preach, she just was. Always there, always steady. Even when I was lost in a world that moved too fast, she stayed rooted. One weekend, I went back to visit her again. This time, I didn't go alone. I brought a small camera crew, not for a show or a documentary. Just something personal, something I could look back on later in life. I wanted to capture her as she is, her hands, her smile, the way she hums when she's cooking. When I walked into the house, she looked surprised but happy. Why the camera? She asked, laughing a little. I told her, because I don't want to forget this. Any of this. We spent the afternoon cooking together. She made kimchi pancakes and I helped her stir the batter. I kept teasing her about using too much salt, and she kept rolling her eyes at me. The crew was quiet the whole time, just filming the little things, the laughter, the silence, the glances. At one point, the cameraman whispered, "You two don't even need to talk. You already understand each other." And he was right. That's what years of love looks like, a language without words. After we ate, I asked her a question I'd been holding back for years. "Mom, when you said those words, 'don't lose yourself trying to make everyone love you,' what did you mean exactly?" She wiped her hands on a towel, sat down, and took a deep breath. She said, "Because I saw what you were doing. You were trying to please everyone, even when it hurt you. You forgot that love doesn't mean sacrificing your peace." Her voice cracked a little, and she looked down at her hands. "You were so young when you started. I didn't want to stop you. But every time I saw you smiling on TV, I wondered if that smile was real." That hit me hard because she wasn't wrong. There were times when that smile wasn't real, when I was hurting but still smiling because the world expected it. She continued, "You don't have to be perfect to be loved, Taehyung. You just have to be honest." I didn't say anything. I just sat there, staring at her, realizing how much she'd been carrying all this time. The fear, the pride, the worry, all of it hidden behind those simple, painful words. Later that evening, after the crew left, we sat outside on the porch. The sun was setting, the sky a mix of orange and purple. She handed me a cup of tea and said softly, "When you were little, you used to tell me that you'd buy me a house by the ocean." I smiled. "I still will," I said. She looked at me and smiled, but then her eyes softened. "I don't need the ocean. I just need you to keep your heart gentle." That was her way of saying she didn't care about fame or success or money. She just wanted to make sure I didn't lose the part of myself that she loved most, the part that still looked at the world with wonder, that still believed in kindness. On the way back to Seoul, I listened to her words over and over in my head, and I realized maybe the reason her words were painful wasn't because they were harsh. It was because they forced me to face truths I wasn't ready to accept. Fame had given me everything I ever dreamed of, but it also made me forget the boy who once sang just for the joy of it. My mom's words pulled me back to him. When I got home, I decided to release that song. I didn't care if it charted or not. I just wanted it out there, for her, for me, for anyone who's ever struggled to live up to someone's expectations, including their own. When it finally dropped, I called her. She said she'd already listened to it. Did you like it? I asked. She paused. It made me cry, she said, but not because it was sad, because I could hear my son again. That's when I knew I didn't need the world approval anymore. I already had hers. Since then, I've learned to balance better. I take days off when I need them. I talk to her more. I try to slow down even just a little. Because I finally understand that success means nothing if you lose the person you love most, or worse, if you lose yourself. Her words still echo in my mind, but they don't hurt anymore. They guide me, they remind me to stay grounded, to stay kind, to stay real. And every time I step on stage, I whisper to myself, be honest, not perfect. That's what she taught me. That's what those painful words were really about. Not warning me away from the world, but leading me back to who I am. And now, when the lights go down and the crowd fades, I can finally smile, not because I have to, but because I want to. Because I know somewhere out there, my mom is smiling too. After that song went out into the world, I thought I was done with the story, that I had finally said everything I needed to say. But healing isn't a single moment. It's a process, one that keeps unfolding in unexpected ways. The days that followed were strange. The song started reaching people, messages from fans came flooding in. Some said it reminded them of their own mothers. Others said it made them cry on their train rides home. And a few said something that really struck me. This song made me call my mom again. That's when it hit me. My mom's painful words didn't just change me, they were changing other people too. The same truth that once stung in my chest was now softening hearts all over the world. It made me realize something. Sometimes our deepest pain becomes someone else's healing. A few weeks later, I was back in the studio. This time not to record, but just to think. The lights were low, the air was warm, and the walls felt heavy with memories. I played the track again, the one for my mom, and let it fill the room. Listening to it now felt different. I could hear not just my voice, but hers too, in every word I wrote. I started to wonder what she felt when she heard it. Did she remember all those nights she stayed up waiting for me to call? Did she remember the day she told me not to lose myself? I'll never know exactly what went through her mind, but I like to believe she felt peace, knowing that her words finally found their way home. That evening, I went live for a short moment. I wasn't planning to talk about anything heavy, just wanted to say hi to the fans. But one comment caught my eye. Taehyung, do you ever regret becoming an artist? I sat there thinking, and then I said, no, but sometimes I regret how long it took me to understand what my mom was trying to protect. Because back then, I thought her words were limits. Now I see they were love in disguise. She wasn't trying to stop me from flying. She was teaching me how to land. There was a pause. I looked into the camera and said, if you have someone who loves you enough to tell you the truth, even when it hurts, hold on to them. Those are the people who keep your soul alive. When the live ended, I felt lighter, like a chapter was closing, not because I forgot the pain, but because I learned how to carry it without letting it weigh me down. A few days later, I visited my mom again. It was raining that day. Soft, steady rain that made the air smell like earth. She opened the door and said, I knew you'd come today. I laughed. How? She smiled. Mothers just know. We sat together, sipping tea and listening to the rain hit the roof. I told her about the messages from fans, how many of them said her words helped them reconnect with their own parents. She smiled, but her eyes glistened a little. See, she said, even pain can become a gift when you share it. That's something I'll never forget because for so long I tried to hide the parts of me that hurt thinking they made me weak. But she showed me that honesty isn't weakness, it's freedom. Before I left that evening, she handed me a small folded piece of paper. I wrote this when you debuted, she said quietly, but I never gave it to you. When I got home, I opened it. Inside was a short note written in her familiar handwriting. When the lights shine too bright, remember the stars are always there, even when you can't see them. You are one of them, my son. But never forget, even stars need the night to rest. I stared at those words for a long time. They were simple, but they held everything. It was her way of reminding me that it's okay to step back, to breathe, to not always be Taehyung of BTS, but just Taehyung her son. That night, I framed that letter and placed it beside my bed. Every morning, before I check my phone, I look at it. It keeps me grounded. It reminds me that I don't have to chase love, I already came from it. And whenever I catch myself overthinking, worrying about whether I'm doing enough, being enough, I hear her voice again. Don't lose yourself trying to make everyone love you. But now I hear it differently. It doesn't sound like a warning anymore. It sounds like a promise. A promise that no matter how far I go, I'll always have a home to return to in her heart, in her words, in the boy I used to be. Maybe that's what growing up really is, learning to understand the things our parents said long before we were ready to hear them. As the rain kept falling outside that night, I closed my eyes and whispered, "Thank you, Mom, not for protecting me from the world, but for teaching me how to survive it without losing myself." The next morning felt unusually calm. I woke up to sunlight gently pouring through the curtains, and for once, there was no rush, no rehearsals, no meetings, no cameras waiting for me. It was one of those rare mornings when I could just breathe. As I made coffee, I noticed the framed letter my mom had written. It was catching the sunlight, glowing faintly like something sacred. I smiled to myself, realizing how strange it is how a few words written years ago could still carry so much strength. That letter wasn't just from my mom, it was like a message from every version of myself that ever needed comfort. Later that day, I went for a walk near the Han River. It's funny, I've walked there countless times, but that day everything looked different. The water shimmered with quiet life, the wind felt softer. I sat on a bench with my hood up and just watched people passing by, students laughing, couples walking hand in hand, and old men feeding pigeons. For years, I had lived in the noise stage lights, loud cheers, endless applause. But that day, the silence was what healed me. In that silence, I could finally hear myself again. I thought about the boy. I used to be the one who left home carrying both dreams and guilt. I wondered what he would say if he saw me now. Would he recognize me? Would he be proud? Maybe. But more than pride, I think he'd just be relieved to know that I finally stopped running from my mother's voice and started walking beside it. Later that evening, I met up with one of the members. We talked about how different things feel now compared to when we first started. We laughed about our struggles, our mistakes, the sleepless nights, but in between the laughter, there was this shared silence, the kind that only people who've gone through the same storms can understand. I told him, "You know, I used to think success would make the pain disappear." He nodded, "But it just gives it a different shape." He was right. Pain doesn't vanish, it transforms. And if you let it, it can become something beautiful, something that reminds you that you're still alive. That night, I went home and opened my journal, something I hadn't done in a while. I started writing a letter to my mom. Not because I needed to send it, but because sometimes writing is the only way to speak from the heart without interruptions. I wrote, "Mom, your words used to feel like chains. Now they feel like roots. They keep me steady when the world tries to pull me away." As I wrote those lines, I felt a strange peace settle over me. I realized that I wasn't just writing to her, I was writing to every part of myself that still needed forgiveness. Forgiveness for not calling enough, for being stubborn, for trying to prove myself in ways that never mattered to her. I closed the journal, exhaled, and whispered, "I'm sorry." But instead of sadness, what I felt was gratitude. Because her words, those painful words, were never meant to wound me. They were her way of loving me, the only way she knew how, by protecting me from a world that doesn't always play fair. In the quiet of that moment, I thought about all the mothers who speak from fear, not because they don't trust their children, but because they know how cruel the world can be. My mom's fear was her love, translated imperfectly into warnings. And for the first time, I understood that language. A few days later, I recorded a short vlog. I didn't plan it, I just turned on the camera and spoke. I talked about how I used to misunderstand my mom's intentions and how that misunderstanding built walls between us. I admitted that sometimes love doesn't sound soft, sometimes it sounds like be careful, don't trust too easily, or don't lose yourself. When the vlog was uploaded, I didn't expect much, but the response was overwhelming. People from all over the world commented about their own parents, how they, too, were learning to translate love from silence, from discipline, from distance. Reading those messages was humbling. It reminded me that no matter how big your world becomes, at the core of it all, we're all just someone's child trying to understand where we come from and where we belong. That night, I called my mom again. The first thing she said was, "I saw your video." I froze for a second. "You did?" "Yes," she said softly. "You finally understood." Her voice broke a little, and I felt my own eyes sting. There was a pause, a long, quiet pause filled with everything words couldn't express. Then she said something I'll never forget. "It wasn't easy watching you hurt, but I always believed you'd find your way back not to me, but to yourself." That's when I realized her painful words weren't a scar, they were a compass. A compass that led me through fame, confusion, loneliness, and finally peace. Now, when I stand on stage and see all those lights, I no longer feel lost. I see them as reflections of the people who helped me get here, including her. And when I hear her voice in my head, It's no longer sharp or heavy. It's warm, gentle, familiar. Don't lose yourself, she still whispers. But now it sounds like love.